For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Vaughan, Capitol Bureau Chief and host of Under the Dome. You're listening to our latest episode for the week of July 8th, 2024. I'm joined today by my politics team colleague, politics reporter Avi Bajpai, higher education reporter Korie Dean, and one of our interns this summer at the News and Observer, Emmy Martin. We'll get to the presidential race in a bit. We're recording this ahead of the weekend, since I'm sure you all know it's 4th of July weekend. Hope everyone had a good holiday weekend. And of course, the news with President Biden is fluid as we record this. So we'll talk about what we know in a little bit. But first, Avi and I want to tell you about a story we had done that published this past week that you may have missed because of its prime vacation time with the Ledge just adjourning. But it was a story that Avi and I worked on for a long time, talking to state lawmakers, particularly Republican state lawmakers, about abortion. And the reason for this, McClatchy, the parent news organization, we're all doing a bunch of abortion-related stories this summer in regards to the election. But with the North Carolina governor's race, it's had probably the one issue that's had the most attention, because Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson, the Republican nominee, is very outspoken about anti-abortion. And Josh Stein, of course, as a Democrat, supports the platform, did not want to overturn Roe versus Wade and would not sign any more restrictions, where Robinson wants more restrictions. So what Avi and I did going into this story is that Mark Robinson can say anything he wants about abortion, but it doesn't mean that he has the power to write a bill or to make anything law without the General Assembly, who are the actual bosses of between the three branches in North Carolina, the way our state government is set up. So we appreciate the lawmakers that talk to us. I know it's not always easy, a topic to talk to reporters on the record about, especially when you get flack from all range of people's opinions about it. So I focused on the Senate side. Avi focused on the House side. So Avi, I'll turn it over to you first about the key factor on the House side is who has the control of everything. And of course, House Speaker Moore is leaving and running for Congress. He'll likely win, of course. And then his heir apparent that he's picked is current House Rules Chair Dustin Hall. So with Hall not already being in that top leadership position, this past session, what did he tell you as far as what he sees happening in 2025, assuming all the variables of the election and he's in power as Speaker?
Yeah, so the main thing that, Hall had to say, and Hall is someone who he's been basically a top lieutenant to Moore. He's been a top leader in the caucus, getting to know all of the caucus members, gauging where they are on several different issues as rules chair. He basically was saying, Republicans are going to be keeping a close eye on November. What happens in November? If Republicans are able to maintain their current numbers in the General Assembly, possibly expand them, a lot of this is going to boil down to what the caucus in both chambers, but particularly in the House, what it's going to look like in January of next year. And he made a point. He made a point to sort of emphasize that it's not just the numbers, but it's actually the specific people, the specific members who will be filling some of these seats that are being vacated right now. There's lots of lawmakers right now who are not going to be coming back. Some people are retiring. Some people ran for other office.
So who is he talking about, or the key players?
Well, he didn't name specific names, but he was basically saying Republicans have, before they can get to sort of talking about what the appetite might be in the caucus, what the general sort of mood is, or if there's anything approaching a consensus on should we keep the current law that's in place, which you'll talk about in a little bit. That's where some senators sort of fall on that side of things. Before they really get to that, there's so many things that are, remain to be seen. What happens in November? How many seats do Republicans control when they come back? And who is filling those seats? One other thing to note is that Hall, like Moore, supports a 6-week ban.
Right, but the speaker basically, runs the show. Things have to get through them, but they also need the caucus vote. So Hall told you that he likes the idea.
He said
a 6-week personally, and so did Moore, but nothing happens without both chambers agreeing. And Senate Leader Berger, who will be back and the leader again, barring some like huge news event, has already said that what he wants is what it is now, the ban with several exceptions after the first trimester, which is the majority of abortions take place in that time frame, or did, and now it's law. It's reduced from what it had been before. But as we're working on this story, I asked Berger about it, and he hadn't talked about next session before, and so I wrote something immediately then, and then talked to more lawmakers. He again spoke for, yes, he's the most powerful person, but he's not a Senate caucus of one. And said, other people disagree. One of those that disagree is Republican Senator Amy Galey, who I had a sit-down interview with. And she does not want to change the law, but she, and I have this quoted in the story, I personally believe that life begins at conception, she said. She said there's other factors. She doesn't like the idea that Republicans somehow would want to restrict birth control. She doesn't see that as there any evidence being that in state government, she said, because the SB 20 included funding, recurring money for birth control. Senator Vicky Sawyer, who Iredell County Republican, was also a key player in SB 20, said basically that it took so much to get to this agreement, with a lot of people not happy about it at all, because the more conservative Republicans thought that ban with exceptions after the first trimester was, way too loose of restrictions and not restrictive enough. Robinson has said that he's totally against abortion. His quotes are that he would sign a heartbeat bill, but he also talks about everything that he wants to there not to be abortions at all. Of course, it's well known that he has paid for an abortion for his now wife ahead of time, and he said that's one of the reasons why he's anti-abortion now. So Democratic candidate Josh Stein for governor has obviously highlighted everything that Robinson has said. So again, the point of our story is that Robinson talks about this and what he wants, but he doesn't have the power. The Republicans in the legislature have the power. And so you talked to Representative Aaron Paré too.
Falls in that same camp, like you mentioned, Senators Galey and Sawyer. Representative Paré, she said personally, she's strongly pro-life, but she, thinks of it differently in terms of how she has to sort of represent her constituents. She wants to keep the current law in place. And one thing that Hall said, just to wrap up on this, is that, he's emphasizing that even in his, if he becomes speaker in January, even in his caucus, there are diverse viewpoints on this issue. So there are potentially still people who want to keep it at 12 weeks, maybe even people who, like we reported last year, wanted to keep it at 20 weeks where it was before. And then, of course, there are people who want to go more restrictive.
Right.
So we're going to have to wait and see.
So the results of the election, if Republicans have a supermajority now, which is veto-proof, so they could overturn a veto from Stein, you would only need a simple majority for something to become law that Robinson would sign if he's the governor. But the way things have worked in the Republican caucus up until now, and what they've said, is that they don't want to pass something until it has consensus in the caucus. And could that change with a different House Speaker? Berger doesn't seem like he's going to change his general position. But again, the election of the 170 lawmakers are the big factor here, really more than governor, for how this will end up playing out. We need to take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to talk to Korie and Emmy about their take on how they see the abortion issue playing out in the races, plus the latest on Biden. We'll be right back.
Eczema is unpredictable, but you can flare less with Ebglyss, a once-monthly treatment for moderate to severe eczema. After an initial 4-month or longer dosing phase, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin at 16 weeks. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
Score more with the college-branded Venmo debit card and earn up to 5% cash back with Venmo Stash. Got paid back? With the Venmo debit card, you can instantly access your balance and spend on what you want, like game day snacks, gear, tickets, and more. The more you do, the more cash back you can earn. Plus, there's no monthly fee or minimum balance. Sign up now at Venmo.com/collegecard. The Venmo MasterCard is issued by the Bancorp Bank N.A. Select schools available. Venmo Stash terms and exclusions apply at venmo.me/stash terms. Max $100 cash back per month.
You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Vaughan, here with politics reporter Avi Bajpai, higher education reporter Korie Dean, and intern Emmy Martin. Before the break, Avi and I talked about our coverage of abortion, how that will play out in the legislature and the governor's race this election and next year. Both Korie and Emmy were on the ground at President Joe Biden's rally the day after his, I think it's pretty fair to say, disastrous debate with former President Donald Trump. And the focus was really the post-debate, maybe, and everything at stake. Not as much big issues like abortion, but did that kind of come up at all? Stein and Cooper were there. Korie?
Yeah, it came up. Like you said, Stein and Cooper were there, and Stein's running for governor, and so he talked about kind of a wide range of issues that he would want to tackle as governor, or what he would do on those issues. And abortion did come up. I mean, he said he would veto any further restrictions on abortion, and that got a lot of cheers from the audience. So I think it's also worth noting that I think the majority of Stein's ads that he has out right now are also pretty much all about abortion and what Mark Robinson has said about abortion. So I think it's going to be a big issue in the governor's race,
and probably party line there. So as we record this on, the late afternoon before the 4th of July, there's been a lot of attention on, is Biden going to change his tactic in the race? Is he going to stay in the race? And maybe something will have happened by the time you listen to this. Maybe it won't. But both of you were there with really hours after all of this. The catalyst for all of this was what Biden's behavior during the debate. Korie, you were inside. Emmy, you were outside. So tell me what the feeling was with the people that you talked to and why they were there. Korie, do you want to start with inside?
Yeah, so inside obviously was people who were Biden supporters for the most part, and they were coming to see the president. And so, like you said, this is the morning after the late night debate, so reactions were still pretty fresh. And I would say they were also pretty mixed. I mean, I talked to, a couple people who said, oh, well, it was just one debate. He may have had a slow start with something that I think we've heard a lot of, national, that's kind of been the spin, but then he picked up by the end. So people were saying that, and those people were saying that they would stick with Biden no matter what. But there were people who were attending who were saying they wanted to see what their options were in the election. And, I would ask them, what did you think of the debate? Do you think there should be a new candidate? And I did have people say, yes, I would like to see the Democrats put up a new candidate. Age was a factor for those people. They would like to see someone younger. So it was interesting that even though obviously they were coming to see the president, they were pretty generally, Biden supporters, that some of them were ready to admit that morning that they would not be opposed to seeing a new candidate up there. So,
and Emmy, you were there talking to people who came to see Biden, but not because they supported him, but they were upset at him.
Yeah, so I was outside the rally, which was at the North Carolina Fairgrounds, and there were several protesters who were there who oppose Biden's stance on Israel. They were talking about their dismay at the aid that is being given to Israel, and also calling for a ceasefire, calling for Biden to, pull away from his current policies. At the beginning, it was a pretty small group. I was there when the first protester arrived, and then it grew to around 75, 80 people standing on the road right outside the rally. And the folks that I were talking to, honestly, told me that they had voted for Biden in 2020. I talked to a handful of people, and they all said that they voted in 2020 for Joe Biden. And then when I asked about 2024, come November, they said that wouldn't be the case. And when asked who they'd vote for, many were still undecided. They're, talking about the third party candidates or some folks were saying they weren't going to vote at all. One protester, a Palestinian American, really was calling on Biden to invest American tax dollars back into the United States rather than providing aid to Israel. And when the police were blocking the road for the motorcade to come into the fairgrounds, which in the end, Biden took a different route, came in through a different exit, the protesters were very, very much so like calling and showing their anger and the way they're opposing Biden, which was really interesting. But also, I was talking to folks who were coming out of the rally. And as folks were walking out of the fairgrounds, like Korie was saying, these probably staunch Biden supporters, or at least staunch Democrats, the protesters moved against the fence and started, calling on the Democrats to take action. And so I talked to several people coming out of the rally. And as Korie said, it was interesting to hear what they're saying post-debate and now post-rally. And everyone I talked to said that they are still going to vote for Biden come November, which I found that kind of juxtaposition between the protesters and, the people coming out of the rally.
It could be the anti-Trump vote, like where they're not going to vote for Trump no matter what, and they're not happy with Biden. So assuming it's Biden, they could stay home or do third party, and that we've seen before can determine elections.
Yeah, you talked about juxtaposition, and that was probably lesser so inside, but there was still juxtaposition. There were who I believe were pro-Palestinian protesters in the rally who did try to, yell and shout while the president was speaking, and that happened maybe 3 or 4 times, and each time the rest of the group shouted them down by yelling 4 more years. So that was an interesting juxtaposition.
And the same thing the last time when he was in Raleigh, I feel like a couple months ago. Yeah. All right, we've got to move on to our picks for headliner of the week. I'll go first with state government news. Senator Jim Perry, a Republican from Kinston, has resigned his seat. He was, at least my headliner, he's been a podcast guest before when he decided to, he was a headliner this past December, and he decided not to run for re-election and then resigned early. So he won't be back for those few sessions, whether there ends up being a budget deal and then the post-election session. So Perry is my headliner. Perry, if you're listening and want to come back on Under the Dome, I'd be glad to talk to you again soon. Korie, before we're at a time where, what is your headliner of the week?
Yeah, so I cover higher education, and the UNC system this week released their legal guidance for campuses to implement the recent DEI ban. So now chancellors have a bit more information. It's still a little unclear about whether DEI offices will be eliminated or just significantly changed, but that information is out there, and the changes will be made before this fall.
Okay. Avi, what is your headliner?
I'm going to switch things over to the movies and go with Robert Towne, who was his critically acclaimed screenwriter who passed away this past week. Most notable on his credits is the movie Chinatown from 1974. Jack Nicholson, Faye Dunaway. Really, really amazing movie from the 70s. And if you even go just look at his uncredited works, it's pretty astonishing, the list of movies he was involved in writing. So,
all right. Well, staying with the entertainment topic, Emmy, what's your headliner?
To keep it light, I'll go with the worst kept secret in Chapel Hill. The Summer I Turned Pretty, a popular Amazon Prime series, will be filming on UNC's campus and on Franklin Street next week. A town tourism official kind of let the name slip. They've been using the name Strawberry Fields for all calls for extras in the town. So if you live in Chapel Hill, you might see some detours, and
so that'll be this week as they're listening.
Yes, that'll be a Monday.
Celeb sightings.
Yeah, you might see some interesting actors.
Okay, Korie said it's an enjoyable watch. I like it. Emmy likes it. Avi,
no opinion.
No. Okay. Geez. All right. Thanks everybody for listening. For Avi Bajpai and Korie Dean and Emmy Martin. Maybe we'll have you on again this summer while you're here and can tell us how things turned out on the filming on campus. I'm Dawn Vaughan, and we'll talk to you next week.
For more from our politics team, subscribe to the News and Observer at newsobserver.com/subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at Under the Dome and NC Insider, and sign up for our weekly political newsletter, also called Under the Dome, at newsobserver.com/newsletters. Thanks for listening.